Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to cross the Øresund to Denmark once again, and we're going to revisit a brewery that I've always had some very positive experiences with, and this beer is a little bit different compared to the other ones that I've reviewed from them before. So we're going to go back to Copenhagen and we're trying another beer from Dry and Bitter Brewery. This one is the Ancient Paradox and it's a black IPA coming in at 7% ABV. Now the black IPA is a style that was very popular back in 2016-2017. You don't really see all that many of them anymore, but it's a style that I always really used to quite enjoy, particularly when they had a little bit more kind of brown sugar in the malt base, and quite often it was the Imperial black IPAs that tended to have that. One of my favourite ones within this category, of course, was the black salts and body malts from Toil. I think I've yet to find one that actually beats that in terms of the black IPA style so far, but I found some really good ones over the last little while, and it's a style that I always try and make an effort to review for you if I do happen to come across them, and I'm very curious to see what Dry and Bitter have to offer in this style too, because they are really good both at the New England style IPAs and at the West Coast IPAs too. I think I've had one or two stouts from these guys before as well, and I was impressed with those, so really curious to see how this one turns out, and as always I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer. Incidentally, if you're interested in Copenhagen craft beer, these guys are one of the Untappd brewers, and if you try these guys or Gamma Brewing Company, you really are in for a treat in my opinion. But yeah, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Dry and Bitter before. No doubt we'll add some more in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Danish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Dry and Bitter Brewery then, on to my brewery notes quickly. So Dry and Bitter Brewery were founded back in 2015 by the owners of Fermentoren. This is Soren Parker Wagner and Jay Pollard, and initially this brewery started out as a kind of continuation of the Crooked Moon brewing brand that they'd already established. So these guys were also involved in the founding of Ølkollektivet, which is a collective brewing space in Gørløse, which is a little bit to the kind of northwestish of Copenhagen if I'm remembering my directions correctly. But they started this up with a few others who also went on to found their own companies. But the brewery brew their beers there along with Gamma Brewing and Ulsnedkeren. The Bad Seed beers are also brewed there under contract, and I can't remember if that's Ulsnedkeren that do that. I think it is. But Rooster and Ghost Brewing were also involved there for a period of time, but they've since moved on, and there's various other breweries have actually brewed in there at different points as well. But in addition to the Copenhagen Fermentoren, they also have another bar in Aarhus, which is over on Øland, if I'm remembering correctly. And both of the Fermentoren bars have beers that are brewed exclusively for them, so you will have to go to either of the bars to try those. The Fermentoren bar in Copenhagen, incidentally, isn't too far away from the main train station, and they've always got some nice, interesting stuff, and they're both Danish and American usually, and some other things from further abroad if you're lucky. But today these guys are brewing somewhere in the region of 200,000 litres of beer per year. They may have updated that a little bit since I made the notes for this brewery, but they also host their own festival too, which is called Fermentoren's Flying Circus, and I think they have events for that both in Aarhus and in Copenhagen, and there's always things going on at Fermentoren as well during the Mikkeller beer celebration as well. So go and check out Fermentoren, try some of the Dry and Bitter beers, and in my opinion you won't be disappointed. Likewise, if you try some of the Gamma Brewing beers, probably Dry and Bitter and Gamma are one of the best, or two of the best rather, craft breweries going around Copenhagen at the moment, so you can't really go wrong with these. Dry and Bitter in my mind are a bit better known for their IPAs. One of my favourite beers that I had from these guys was the Hobo Chick, which incidentally was the first one that I tried from them. So yeah, try some of their beers along with some of the Gamma beers and you really won't be disappointed. I think it's quite cool to see a beer bar kind of expand out a little bit and actually start up their own brewery. And these beers are distributed fairly widely throughout Europe. I think they're down in Italy now. Someone was telling me they'd seen their beers down in Italy. I'm sure I saw them in Germany when I was there about a year ago, and I have seen these over in Scotland too. So, you know, a brewery to keep an eye on in the future, in my opinion. But yeah, that's all you really need to know about Dry and Bitter Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more, of course, you can check out the brewery website in the description below, and of course you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that, and that'll keep you up to date with all the latest goings on and the new beers and stuff like that. They're a fairly prolific brewery. Pretty much every time I go over to Copenhagen there is a new beer from these guys out there. So yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself then. So with this one, I have to admit, I did wonder when I got this if it was a kiwi that was on it or an ostrich. I wasn't quite sure about that. It did look a little bit more like a kiwi in my mind. But nice artwork, kind of standard artwork from Dry and Bitter, to be honest with you. And like I said, the thing that really attracted me to this, because there were a few other Dry and Bitter beers there, the IPAs, but this one being a black IPA, I've never tried a black IPA from this brewery. So that was the main reason that I went for this one. As I said, it comes in at 7% ABV. It's hopped with Citra, Chinook and Simcoe, and it says on the side here, the Ancient Paradox Black IPA, roasted dark chocolate meets zesty grapefruit in the long debated style that is the black IPA. A wide selection of dark malts provide a rich and toasty base, while Citra, Chinook and Simcoe hops bring a fruity zing to the proceedings. Roasted yet fruity, black but pale, sometimes contradictions just work. So yeah, I'd agree with that. The black IPA, one of these styles, I think when I first tried this I was like, you know, what the hell is this? But then after you try a couple of them, and particularly when you try some of the really good ones, you just really start to like it. So, you know, this is a style, as I say, that I really do enjoy, so please give me some black IPA recommendations in the description below. I mean, I've tried a few from Sweden recently and from, of course, a couple from Denmark. But let me know if you're watching from Scotland, because I will be going home to Scotland for a little bit soon. Let me know if you've got any particular recommendations for that. I'm not sure. I will leave it at that. There's still a little bit in the can there, but yeah. So as you can see with this one, as I mentioned, this one is a 7% black IPA. If I hold this beer up to the light, kind of as you'd expect, this one, it's actually one of the darker black IPAs that I've tried. It has that kind of Coca-Cola colour to it. I mean, it has a little, if you put a little bit of light through it, there's a bit of a Coca-Cola colour edge, but I would describe this one as being a really dark, ebony sort of rosewood colour. There's a solid finger and a half of a frothy, I would say medium kind of tan head on this one. You can smell some of the lovely fruity notes coming out of this beer just as you move it around actually, but one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass and a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of that head there. But you know, overall, nothing particularly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider it is a black IPA. So yeah, let's take a look at the aroma and just see how we get on then. Ooh, now that's pretty nice. So this one to me comes across as being very well balanced. You can definitely smell a little bit of that roasty, toasty black malt. At the same time, the sort of chocolatey edge of this beer is really just smoothing it out a little bit. The chocolate is almost a little bit kind of Jekyll and Hyde. You definitely get a little bit of that milky chocolate quality to this beer, but you also get a bit of that higher, you know, 80-90% cocoa type chocolate aroma coming out of it too. It almost just smells a little bit charred because of those black malts in there. So it's a really interesting kind of combination of things that's going on in the malt base there. There's a little touch of brown sugar, you know, caramelly and biscuity sort of things, and it's, to be honest, it smells more like a kind of toasty brown sugar rather than having that sweet syrupy caramel note to it. So to me, this is definitely one of the more, it smells like one of the smoother black IPAs that I've come across, but at the same time it's more leaning towards that roasty toasty end of the spectrum in terms of its malt base. But there is, you know, it's interesting. It's got the roasty toastiness, but it does have a little bit of a sweetness to it. It's almost got a little bit of a kind of roasty brown bread crust to it. It reminds me of some of these German breads that I used to love. I always loved the bakeries when I lived in Germany. Still a little bit in there, doesn't want to come out. But yeah, I always used to love the German rye bread and things like that, and to me there is a little touch of that coming out in this one. Definitely some of that smooth German brown bread in there. It really does smell, as I said, like a sort of toasty bread crust kind of thing. Incidentally, one of the other things I should say about this is this was a 440ml can, not a half-litre can, and usually the Danish beers come in the half-litres, apart from some of the more kind of hipster breweries, I guess, in Copenhagen. But yeah, definitely a nice little bit of a roasty bread crust sort of thing here. I'm getting little touches of nutty and woody nuances in this beer as well. For me, the aroma in this one, the malt has a really, really good presence, and I think, to be honest, that's maybe one of the reasons why I enjoy black IPAs so much. I've said repeatedly on the channel that I love my beers to have a good malty presence, and the black IPA certainly combines that nice big hoppy juiciness with that big malty presence. So overall, the malt base, like I said, it does have a good degree of sweetness to it, but it leans a little bit more towards that roasty, toasty side of the spectrum. In terms of the green side of the hop, there is a little bit of a kind of earthiness to this one, which you would expect, but it's got a nice little bit of a floral quality as well. But to me, really, the green side of the hops is dominated more by a kind of grassy element. The other two things are a little bit more subtle than that. The fruity side of this beer is very interesting as well. Like I said, this beer is Citra, Chinook and Simcoe. Simcoe normally would give you a nice passion fruity note. Citra, of course, is more of a kind of mango one, but depending on what you mix it with, you can get more grapefruit out of it. And Chinook is like a big, piney, resinous, grapefruity type hop, this one. I've tried a few single hop Chinook beers and I wasn't that keen, but if you combine Chinook with the right things, you can really make it shine in my mind. But for me, the fruity side of this beer, you can definitely smell that sort of almost cascadey type grapefruit. And so, you know, that is one of the kind of pseudonyms, I guess, of a black IPA, is calling it a Cascadian Dark. And you do get that nice grapefruity note out of this one, but there's a lot of red fruit in there. There's a little bit of a raisiny sharpness. There's a little bit of a kind of figgy quality, and almost like a kind of blackberry, blackcurrant-ish note as well. If I was blind smelling this, I might think they've added a little bit of Williamette to it, which is a very popular hop to put in these black IPAs. I have had a few black IPAs and stouts that have had Simcoe in it, and Simcoe can be really, really interesting when you add it to a dark malt base. It can give you some really kind of crazy hoppy notes, actually. So for me, definitely grapefruit, definitely a little bit of a kind of blackcurrant-y note to this one. I don't think quite blueberries, a bit of raisiny and figgy quality, and it does have a little bit of a kind of juicy berryish fruit. That really is it for me, grapefruits and then juicy berry fruits on this. You're not getting the usual mangoes or passion fruit, the mangoes that you'd expect from the Citra, or the passion fruits you'd expect from Simcoe. Like I say, hops can really change a hell of a lot depending on what you mix them with in the malt base. So as I always say, take a bit of time and just enjoy the malt, the aroma of the beer. In this one, particularly for the malt base, just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, because that's always half the experience with craft beers and whiskies and sakes and stuff like that. But we're going to have a taste of this one now and just see how we get on. This one is the Ancient Paradox, a black IPA coming in at 7% ABV from Dry and Bitter Brewing Company in Urkollektivet in Gurløse, just to the north of Copenhagen in Denmark. Slange, skål. That's really pretty good, actually. It's interesting, this one. To me, it starts off really smooth and really and being a little bit sweeter, but the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, this beer really dries out and starts to lean more towards that roasty, toasty black malt side of things. They've pulled this one off really nicely. I'm not surprised with Dry and Bitter, to be honest, because they're a good quality brewery, but this is definitely a more roasty, toasty black IPA, this one. Yeah, I like how the flavours in this one go together. The more that you drink of it, the more that the bready qualities and the brown sugars start to come out of this beer, but still, I would stick with that initial kind of statement that I made. This is definitely leaning towards the roasty, toasty end of the spectrum in my mind. But it gets a thumbs up from me. I wouldn't hesitate to drink this again. To me, black IPAs aren't really a kind of sessionable beer. This is perhaps the one, if you go into a session, you know, you drink a couple of IPAs, you'd have one of these, and then you'd go on to an Imperial Stout to finish off. That's the way I would kind of treat this beer. This is a beer that you just drink one of at a time, in my opinion. And I would say that both for this beer individually and for the style, generally. But to me, this is a really solid black IPA. So what you're going to feel in the middle of your palate is a nice brown bready quality, just blanket in the middle of your tongue. You're going to feel that kind of dry out a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste. In the very centre of your palate, there is a little bit of that more oily, caramelly note. It's almost a little bit treacly, to be honest with you, but it is quite an oily caramel quality, and it is almost like a well-fired brown sugar. It's not quite as oily as you're going to get compared to some other beers and some other black IPAs that I've come across, but it's a very good example of this style, if you like. And to me, like I said, definitely this one leans more towards the roasty toasty side of things. I've always found that the black IPAs, if you age them a little bit, the malt base will tend to sweeten up, to be honest with you. And that's kind of an interesting thing, particularly when you've got the Imperial Black IPAs. You can experiment with that a little bit, such as the black salts and body malts. To me, this one, I don't actually know when this was canned. It says the 30th of April 2019, and it's best before the 30th of October. So I'm kind of drinking this one. I'm reviewing this one for you on the 3rd of August. And so that would put it roughly in the middle of its shelf life, if you like, and it's pretty solid as it is. If you probably left it towards the end of that shelf life, it would gradually, I think, maybe get a little bit more sweeter, and the hops would drop a little bit. But the black IPAs, as I say, they do last that little bit longer. But to me, the malt base is nice in this, and the longer I sit thinking about the aftertaste, it does get a little touch more kind of woody. And if you go to the very centre of your palate and just come forward a little bit more, it does have a little touch of a kind of nutty flavour to it as well, which is interesting. Yeah, I like how that comes across, and the more you drink of it, like I say, the more the slightly brown sugary notes come out in the centre of your palate. It's really when you move into the aftertaste and the beer the middle of your tongue can dries out a little bit, that you get more of these roasty toasty flavours. That toasted bread crusty note that I was talking about with this beer is quite prominent with this one, actually, and I do like how all the malt base goes together in this one. It's quite a complex malt base, but it really does just slot together very, very well. On the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, there's a good little bit of earthiness there. As you come further forward along the sides of the tongue, that smoothens out a little bit. You get a good little bit of a floral aromatic quality, maybe even a little bit of a piney resin note, considering there's Chinook in here. You do get that towards the front corners of the palate. Then round the very front curve of the tongue, it's just a little bit lighter and grassy. And then behind the front curve of the palate, of course, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters start to push their way out of the beer. So for me, fruity side of this beer, it really does have a lot of that dark grapefruit, and that kind of suits the more roasty toasty tone that this beer is taking. As you come further forward from that, the grapefruit for me just kind of lingers there. I was mentioning earlier that this beer did have that kind of Cascade aroma to it, to be honest. I don't know if they will have used Cascade as maybe a bittering hop or something in this, but it really did smell sort of like like some of these Cascadian darks that I've had. But to me, the fruit in this one really is a kind of straight up grapefruit. You do, on the tip of your tongue, you will get a little bit of a red fruity note out of this beer. Yeah, like when you take this beer in, there is a little bit of a sharp and a slightly sharper raisiny note to the beer, maybe a little bit of blackcurrant and blackberries or something, and the further you go into the aftertaste, the more it becomes like a sort of figgy, red curranty, red berryish type quality. It does become a little bit more kind of candied and strawberry in the aftertaste, but really the thing that lingers there with this beer is that slightly darker grapefruit. Some of the earthiness in the beer lingers as well, along with the roasty black malts, and then some of that piney resin as well. But I mean, overall, this is a really, really nice example of the black IPA on the toastier end of the spectrum, but I wouldn't expect anything less of dry and bitter, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this beer again. In terms of the mouthfeel then, mid-bodied beer, I don't think there's much debate about that. Carbonation is quite smooth in my mind. Yeah, carbonation is quite smooth. The beer is quite an oily mouthfeel in my opinion, with this one. There's a good bit of bitterness to this. I think you're talking around 70, maybe 60, 70 IBUs with this beer, both from the malt base and from the hops. There's a bit of, this beer starts off being a little bit sweeter, but then it really kind of leans in towards that more roasty, toasty side of things on the malt base, and there's a good little bit of a juicy, fruity quality in there as well. It's got a little bit of sharpness in the beginning, then it just kind of fades out to be a little bit kind of more juicy and sweet in my mind. But overall, a really, really nice beer, this one, and I'm glad that I was able to review this one for you. It's cool to try something a little bit different from a brewery that I know are very, very good. So yeah, this one was the Ancient Paradox, a black IPA from Dry and Bitter, and I think they've done a good job of that. It's a bit of a shame if they only brew this as a kind of once-off, because this is a style that almost is dying a little bit, but they've produced something here that I think is pretty damn good, leaning towards the darker side of the spectrum, or the more roasty side of the spectrum, I should say. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Dry and Bitter as well. I'm sure I'll return to this brewery in the near future. Give me some other black IPA recommendations. Check out my social media, and I will catch you guys very soon. The Ancient Paradox, a black IPA at 7% from Dry and Bitter Brewing Company in Copenhagen over in Denmark. Until the next time, Slàinte just now, and I'll catch you guys later. Slàinte, skål.